Yo, what is up everybody, it's Jay the Great here and welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today we have an all new video with the great Swagkage, and as you can tell by the title, this is Madara versus Obito, closer than you think. So folks, Swag did this topic specifically a couple years ago if I'm not mistaken, and the video was very interesting with him acknowledging some contentious aspects as far as these two opponents are concerned, right? With the right versions of these characters respectively, we could end up with a very contentious and interesting battle to discuss. So clearly, versions of these respective characters will greatly alter the conclusion of this matchup, with Obito probably beating EMS Madara, with him scaling below Hashirama and Hashirama admitting inferiority, and Obito beating most likely Edo Madara and most Madaras during the war arc, as Hashirama implied that Madara wasn't gaining his past powers up until he absorbed Hashirama's Sage Mode, right? So if Madara is not even at his prime level, and Obito is stronger than Hashirama with him admitting inferiority, then Obito beats most versions of Madara and clearly loses to Jubidara, right? Because Jubidara is above Obito. And now if we're talking about Obito, Obito more than likely loses to any version of Madara, EMS or above, if we're talking about Orange Mask or most definitely Yellow Mask, right? So the most contentious aspect to me would be White Mask Obito versus early Edo Madara, or possibly EMS Madara. That matchup would be interesting, as White Mask Obito is able to control Jinchuriki at this point. He's going toe-to-toe with KCM2 Naruto, Guy, and Kakashi simultaneously, while also having to control the Jinchuriki that he's controlling. Right, so there's some interesting aspects and things that we can extrapolate when we're talking about White Mask Obito versus certain versions of Madara. But yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how Swag scales this one, what matchups he'll discuss, and what he'll extrapolate from the canonical literature provided. But before I begin, analysts greatly appreciate it. Hit that like button, turn on bell notifications to stay updated with yours truly. And if you enjoy, man, and you mess with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button, because once you do, become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time, screen. Let's see what Swag says about this one.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
What up?
So, got another versus battle on the stove today, and I brought Six with me.
What up, Six?
Hello.
Shout out to Six.
Trying to help Swag get over his Madara bias.
That's actually the main focus and goal of today's video. If you're new here, I have a little bit of a reputation. People won't leave me alone about how much I like Madara. And now, the thing is, I haven't uploaded a particularly Madara positive video in like 4 years now, but people still comments every single time. Now, I'm gonna do the unthinkable, right? Obito might not definitively beat Madara, but what I do feel pretty confident about is that most versions of Madara can't beat most versions of Obito. At least not based on what I know or what Six knows about the series.
Okay, when we're looking through it, we're like, the best most of these end in is a draw. Except when you get to like Jubi forms, right? Yeah. Like when you get to like three-eyed Madara, or even just like one-eyed Jubi Madara.
It's not fair, yeah. Madara smacks.
Yeah, he's gonna like beat down Obito. Is there anyone in particular you want to start out with, or?
Okay, maybe we probably shouldn't use these, or like the kid Obitos, like, Team Minato Obito. And that goes the same for Madara as well. Like, we don't even know what kid Madara was capable of, like,
correct
scale to.
But the problem is, how do we get Madara to hit and put down Obito? And if we can't do that, is there a way to say Madara will win outside of that? And then through all the research, it was kind of just like, no. So like the first scenario, or one of the scenarios we went over, was whenever Kabuto happened to summon Madara directly in front of Obito.
He was definitely,
and he seemed to get scared or shaken up a little bit. And we're like, well, what's other ways to interpret this that don't necessarily mean Obito is weaker than Madara? And one that I think is valid and even probable in this instance is the fact that you could say Obito didn't want Madara revived because Madara would want to become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki just like he did, and he just wants to go through with this plan. He doesn't want to bring Madara into the fold at all. And I think that is a bit more probable than him just being outright scared of Madara and his fighting abilities.
I might have to counter that point and say this. If he acknowledged in his own mind from his own subjective lens that he's superior to Madara, then why would Madara being revived be a problem anyway, right? Because if he's confident that he's superior, then he wouldn't worry about Madara taking the Ten Tails and becoming the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, because he would say, oh, I'm superior to this guy, so it's not a problem anyway. He would definitely not show weakness, especially to Kabuto, who he knows could be a possible threat if he were sure that he was superior to Madara. So yeah, that might be part of the reason why he was like, oh shit, but that also allows us to imply that Obito acknowledges his inferiority to Madara, even at this point in the series, in the manga and in the anime, right? So to counter that, even if a reason he was shaken was due to him being worried about Madara becoming the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, then that would still lead to the conclusion that he's inferior to Madara, right? Because like I said, if he wasn't, then he wouldn't be scared of Madara taking the Ten Tails, right? Because he'd be like, all right, I'll just put him down if I have to, or I'll take care of him if I have to, right? So simply put, despite that being a reason, that doesn't really necessarily negate the fact or the high probability that Obito is acknowledging his inferiority. That's just me playing devil's advocate, and that's what I have to say about that. Let's continue.
Especially considering that he's never seen Madara fight before. Obito met Madara when he was a crippled old man siphoning life energy off of the God Tree. So it's not like he thought that version of Madara was super powerful. I mean, like that Madara even said, if he wasn't connected to the God Tree, he would just fall over and die. And
I guess it's a good counter to my counter, to be fair.
Part of what gave Obito so much power, not physical power, but like social clout, you know, the power to openly declare war against the entire planet and be taken seriously was the name Madara Uchiha. Nobody cared about Obito. He was kind of like, you know, a nothing ninja who didn't ever amount to anything. But Madara Uchiha was this name that was like feared all across the world. Everybody knew who he was. He was the guy who routinely fought against the first Hokage. So that's one reason. And another reason is, like Six said, he could have just been worried. I actually don't think that this is a could have situation either. I think it's very likely that he probably was just worried that Madara was going to become the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails. And something else that Six mentioned is, keep in mind at this point, Obito did not know how Edo Tensei worked. And this is not an assumption. This is confirmed when Obito later asks Kabuto to explain how it works so that he can counter it in the future if it becomes a problem for him. And since he really wanted to be the person in control of the Eye of the Moon plan and to be the person who launched the Infinite Tsukuyomi, like I think that something like this being important enough to him that it would cause him to break a sweat and lose his composure for a moment. I mean, I don't think, like, I think it makes sense. I don't think that this is necessarily a sign that indicates he's weaker than Madara or so much weaker than Madara that he's just like terrified that Kabuto's gonna, you know, activate him and kill him. What people would probably take away from this is that Obito sees Madara as a threat. I think that's this line of reasoning type of interpretation.
Now, there are a couple things that you could factor into this versus battle that we probably should have mentioned at the beginning. We kind of want to exclude because we're trying to figure out who would actually win in a fight between you two, like a fair fight. And that is the chakra rods that Madara planted in Obito's Hashirama cells and the heart seal that he had placed on Obito.
Right.
These two things, while Madara should have access to them, like in canon, if they were to fight that way, we don't want to give him access to because it would kind of just make the fight completely unfair.
Yeah.
And talking about the chakra rods, there's actually something interesting there because Obito, whenever Madara uses the chakra rods on him, he actually is able to fight off or resist Madara's chakra, which I think is a pretty impressive feat.
I'm not exactly sure how the chakra rods work as far as transmitting Madara's like raw like chakra power or whatever. So the only other example we see of this sort of thing is before Madara anyway, when Naruto fights Pain and he gets his hands, both of them restrained by one chakra rod, and in base isn't able to do anything about it. But then later, when he goes into V2 with Four Tails, all of the chakra rods that Pain puts in him just pop off, right? Regardless of like whether or not like the chakra rods are putting out Madara's power at like 80% or 60%, like whatever arbitrary number you want to throw at it. What we can work with is that Madara was able to totally restrain Tobirama and Hashirama with these rods. Granted, Hashirama was weakened, though personally, in my opinion, Obito seemed to be in worse shape when he started fighting off Madara's influence. Hashirama was really beat up, so I'd be willing to grant somebody that maybe they're in comparable states here, but like Obito doesn't have a heart, he's bleeding out, you know, like he's literally moments away from dying.
So now the difference between these three different scenarios is when he's doing this to Tobirama has the worst case here, because when he's doing it to Tobirama, there's no hand signs. He's just throwing rods at him, and he was clearly immobilized from the first few, and that's how he was able to throw so many more into him, into his head or whatever. So Tobirama has the worst case here, but Obito being stronger than Tobirama doesn't really help us with anything. It's not like Tobirama is anywhere near Madara's level of strength or Hashirama's.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about the Hashirama comparison is like, yeah, you can maybe imply that they're in a similar state of weakness, considering that Hashirama is huffing, puffing. He's like chipping because he's an Edo Tensei. He had just got done fighting Madara for a long time, you know, before Madara got revived. But when Madara is using the hand signs on Hashirama, he actually uses the full hand sign. I don't remember the name of this hand sign. I think this one is full tiger. But when he's doing it on Obito, he's only using one hand. So that could imply he's putting more effort into the Hashirama one.
It's a good observation.
We also do know with Hashirama, he was trying to make him not move, and with Obito, he was trying to make him weave specific hand signs. So aside from the power level through the rods thing that Swag mentioned earlier, it's also like, okay, well, is it more difficult to make someone move than to make them sit still?
There are a lot of variables here, right? It's difficult to make any concrete observations.
It's a multivariate equation for sure.
But I think that Six and I agreed it was definitely something worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Right, like it's something that you can look at all of these different examples and decide how you feel about it yourself. So now that we've gotten the Rinnegan rods and stuff out of the way, because setting that aside, in an actual combat setting where Madara doesn't have any of these like unbelievable advantages, like we were saying at the beginning of the video, it's difficult to figure out how he like hits Obito, because even if we grant that Madara is faster than Obito, which I mean, sure, like he probably is. Is he really so much faster than Obito that he can just like bypass Kamui and hit him enough times to kill him? Like, I don't know.
It's hard to say. Like that's definitely the part where it just gets screwy and weird and hard to figure out. Like we were saying earlier, the best this ends for Madara is like a draw. So a way we were thinking about looking at it was maybe from a what if Kishimoto wrote it type narrative perspective. But then I was like, well, okay, if we look at it this way, every time someone runs into Kamui, they have a way to get around it or counter it. At least every time Obito fights someone, he doesn't always have to encounter someone like that. Like Fu and Torine, they had the bugs. Conan had the paper bombs. Minato had flying Raijin level 2. It's just whenever Obito gets into a major conflict, there's always some way that the opponent can bypass Kamui. So if we're like, okay, well, if Kishimoto wrote it, how would he have Madara bypass it? And I was just stumped. I have no idea.
Madara doesn't have any hacks like that would allow him to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't have any hacks, and unlike Conan.
All right, so I gotta add this when it comes to the speed and the current aspects that are being discussed. We have to presuppose that Madara and Obito's speed is relative, right? We have to presuppose that. Because if we presuppose the antithesis of that, then Madara could hit Obito. Why? Because if there's a significant enough gap in speed, then simply put, Obito's literal synapses wouldn't fire in time for him to activate Kamui, and Madara would strike him before, again, he could activate the Kamui itself. All right, so I will agree that it is quite the presupposition to have, right? Saying that Madara is so much faster than Obito that Obito can't even react in the slightest, with his literal synapses not being able to fire in time to activate Kamui, right? That's quite the presupposition. You'd have to establish the speed difference and rationally deduce how that's the case, right? It's not exactly easy to do. White Mask Obito, if we're talking about him, was able to react to KCM2 Naruto, right? But again, we saw Madara do the same thing casually as well, right? So the speed aspect is probably the most contentious, right? Because Obito has the X factor of X factors, which is the Kamui, right? If you can bypass the Kamui like Minato did, or Naruto and Kakashi did, then you could strike him. If you can't, and the gap in speed isn't significant enough, then simply put, you won't be able to hit the guy. That's the problem, right? So it all depends on how you presuppose Madara's speed. But let's continue on.
And it's not like we're granting him any prep time, because that would be unfair. So, I mean, what would he do? When he's Jubi Madara, we know that he stops Obito from using Kamui by just throwing rods at him. But that was like Obito absorbing himself into Kamui. It wasn't the actual phasing part.
I mean, like you said, every single time that Obito's fought somebody who's been able to damage him, it's been somebody who is able to bypass Kamui. Minato, who, by the way, he fought when he was a child. I would also like to say Obito was able to move, like, on pace with Minato, right? Like, he lost the fight, and he lost badly. Like, Minato beat him up. It was... I was gonna say I don't want to call it a stomp, but it was a stomp. But they were moving at similar speeds. Then Kakashi literally had his other Sharingan, so he could access the same dimension.
Correct.
Right? These are all very, like, weird or unique or just straight up unfavorable to Obito types of situations where it's like you can't grant Madara any of these advantages, right? Like, Madara can't do what Conan can do. He doesn't have Kamui. And also, Obito's way older than he was when he fought Minato. And now, some people
more battle
might
experience too.
Yeah, exactly. And now, some people might disagree with this, that Minato is faster than Madara, especially with Flying Raijin. Flying Raijin teleportation is definitely faster than Madara can just move regularly.
100%.
So, like, what does he do? He doesn't
I
have an
agree.
equivalent
Minato is
to
faster
any
than
of those
Madara.
things.
Yeah. So, and then, like, on the flip side, what does Obito do to Madara? So there's
that's the thing.
there's two ways you can look at it. So, like we said earlier, the best outcome for Madara is most likely a draw, but that's because I don't think that Madara would sit there and keep attacking Obito until Madara just tired himself out and then just allow Obito to come up and get him away in the Kamui. I think at some point Madara would just stop attacking Obito so he doesn't waste more chakra or whatever, and then they would, I don't know, go home. Because like what is Obito gonna do? It's not like I don't think Obito's fast enough or Madara's dumb enough to just get caught.
It's weird, right? Like, Madara has a speed advantage, but I don't think it's a speed advantage that's overwhelming enough. Unless we use Sage Mode 1 Rinnegan Madara. I think that Madara, just with, like, the double precog of Sharingan plus Sage Mode, like, I don't know. I feel like he'd be able to, like, sense Obito's, like, emotional desire to, like, the Kamui or whatever, right? Like, you know how, like, Sasuke starts seeing Naruto, like, move preemptively when he first gets the 3 Tomoe? Now, granted, I'm just going out on a limb saying this, right? Like, I can't prove this, but my gut just tells me that, like, Madara would just, like, be able to tell when Obito would, you know, like, start priming Kamui. Right? That Madara is just, like, way faster than any of his, like, other versions, aside from, like, Jubi Madara, of course. He, like, just dismisses Hashirama, Tobirama, Naruto, Sasuke, and all of the Biju at the same time. So if there is a version of Madara that's, again, 10 Tails aside, that's going to be able to beat Obito, it's definitely that one, obviously, I guess. And I think that one has a pretty good chance, but all of the others, it's just like, no way. And even then, if that's like the strongest non-Six Paths version of Madara, or like non-Ten Tails Jinchuriki version of Madara, and if we throw that version of Madara up against the strongest non-Ten Tails Jinchuriki version of Obito, Madara gets wiped because that is Dual Mangekyo Obito, who's like,
double the speed.
I feel like,
Cracked,
like I think that Dual Mangekyo Obito is really underrated because people think that it's just like base Obito with like Kakashi's, but like no, like he's like straight up reacting to Kaguya's attacks and stuff, and like able to like open up portals to the different dimensions that she can access, and like keep them like the stuff that he does in that Kaguya fight is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, Madara is not touching that version of Obito. I think Obito literally just walks up to him and sucks Madara up. Like, that is the speed difference.
Yeah, it's just not fair whatsoever.
I tend to agree because he's double the speed.
Madara that's winning is like
he's double the speed of what he usually is with one eye.
Kid Madara would be Kid Obito.
One Sharingan, excuse me.
Madara versions versus Jubito versions. Jubi Madara is just wiping the floor with him.
Yeah.
Like, not having access to Kamui, aside from being just weaker than Madara, just screws Obito over in those situations.
Yeah,
like,
it's just not fair.
I mean, it's weird he doesn't have access to Kamui. Like, we talked about this a little bit before recording, but Obito can't use Kamui in phase with the 10 tails inside of him, but he can do it when the 9 tails is inside of him. I don't know. It's really like a plot nerf, like, actually in full form.
Yeah. So. It was definitely like a live balance patch drop that happened when he became the Jinchuriki.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but like, I mean, I think that speaks to just like how much of an uphill battle Madara is gonna run into here, though, because like even Kishimoto knew that like Obito with the 10-tail stuff and Kamui wasn't going down. There was just no way anybody was going to be able to do anything to him.
But he's already super durable, and then on top of being super durable, even if you try to hit him, you can't. Nah, no way. No way.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's not to you know, downplay Madara's durability or whatever, because Madara is also a tank. It's just that, like, I think that Obito deserves a bit more like appreciation for that, I guess, than I think most people would be willing to grant him. So, like, for Madara to win, he's probably, unless he gets off like a perfect Susanoo hit, he's probably gonna have to hit Obito multiple times when Obito can just use Kamui, and I don't think that's realistic, like, at all. Yeah. So the best case scenario for Madara is a draw. I think that. So my stance here is that I think that no matter which version of Obito we use, he probably has more win conditions than Madara. But it's still not necessarily likely that he wins.
Yeah. But how does he implement them?
Right, yeah, exactly. I think Duo Mangekyo, Obito aside, the Obito that has the best chance is the White Mask War Arc one, controlling the Jinchuriki. But, I mean, I'm just going to be honest. Every version of Madara, like Final Valley, Edo, revived with Sage Mode and No Eyes, and then revived with Sage Mode and Rinnegan, like, all of them teared the Jinchuriki and the Biju apart. I mean, we saw one of those versions actually do it. Granted, it wasn't the Jinchuriki, it was just the tailed beasts. But I think we can all agree that, like, Edo Madara is ripping the Jinchuriki apart, right? Like, they pose no threat to him. The question, I guess a more interesting question, and one that's relevant to this video, is could he do that while also fighting Obito? I think yes, he could. I think that they would just be non-threats to him.
So I just thought about it. I like just now. Yeah. Sage, Rinnegan, Madara could just hit Obito with Limbo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's how that one could win.
He'd probably just be able to beat DMS Obito that way too. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
DMS Obito
possibly
might just be so fast.
Yeah, he might just be too fast.
The core point of the video is that no matter which version of Obito we use or which version of Madara we use, if we're talking about like you know, orange mask, yellow mask, white mask, Obito versus Final Valley, Edo, or revived Madara, unless he has access to Limbo, Madara doesn't have anything that he can do to like damage Obito. I guess like using equivalent versions, Madara does win more than he loses, but like most of the relevant ones, it's like Final Valley and Edo Tensei are the versions of Madara that most people talk about in versus battles, and those versions of Madara just straight up like don't have a win condition. But okay, everybody,
interesting video. My mind has changed a little bit, I'll admit.
Thanks for watching the video. Bye.
Alright folks, I definitely want to get my thoughts on this, and I'll admit, at the beginning of this video, I was under the impression that Swag was going to argue Madara beats Obito, and then that's the end of that. Alright, besides Jubito and possibly White Mask Obito with certain versions of Madara. But my mind has changed quite a bit, because when you look at the speed, it does seem to favor Obito. Right? It does seem to favor Obito. Obito, as a teenager, was relative to Minato's speed. Minato's faster than Tobirama, and Madara acknowledges that Tobirama was the fastest shinobi of their time, right? Hence, Obito scales above Madara in speed. It makes sense logically. Now, I agree with Six towards the end of the video. He said Limbo clones could make a difference. I agree. If Madara has, the Sage powers and the Rinnegan, and I believe he was revived at that point, if I'm not mistaken, then Limbo clones could possibly be what he would use to defeat Obito. And if the gap in speed is close enough, that would take him out, right? Now, DMS Obito is going to be, I would say almost safely, significantly faster than Madara. Besides Jubidara, of course, and possibly Sage Mode Rinnegan Madara, possibly. So, that version of Obito beats EMS Madara and Edo Madara at the beginning of the war arc, for sure. He'll have a significant advantage in speed and probably Kamui him away, snipe him away. So admittedly, I didn't look at it this way. I'll admit, my own emotional bias made me lean towards Madara. Madara is a legend, but again, that's not a logically valid way to do argumentation. It's not, right? So Obito does scale above Madara in speed. He does, besides arguably Sage Mode Rinnegan Madara, and obviously Jubidara scales above him as well. But besides those two versions, Obito does scale above him. He does scale above him. So, simply put, what we have here is an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. That's basically what we have here, right? The unstoppable force being Madara, and the immovable object being Obito, because you can't damage the dude. You just can't hurt him. He's too fast, and his hacks allows him to negate any durability he needs anyway, because you just can't hit the guy, right? And with the speed advantage Obito has, that would be the case. Right, that would be the case. The only arguments for Madara would be if we presuppose the gap in speed is small enough, right? So, but I believe you're fighting a losing battle there, because you'd have to use rationale to explain why that would be. Because empirically, it's implied that Obito has greater speed than Madara, right? Empirically. Now, you could try to bring up the first event in the canonical literature that Six and Swag talked about, which is when Obito showed his concern when seeing Edo Madara. Right? He did show some concern, and maybe if you have a certain interpretation, you would say, well, Obito just scales below the guy because he's threatened by him. But empirically, the speed, again, is in favor for Obito. Because like I said, Obito's speed, at this point, as an adult, is arguably even superior in speed to possibly even Hokage Minato, right? The same Minato that faced in teenage Obito. Now we're talking about an adult, older, wiser, more experienced, and probably stronger Obito, with White Mask and Orange Mask. And Tobirama admits inferiority in speed to Minato. Madara admits that Tobirama was the fastest of their time. Hence, with the empirical evidence provided, this scaling makes perfect sense rationally. So I'll admit this video did point my mind in a different direction, and rightfully so. Their scaling was really good, and I'll admit I actually lean towards Obito now, with the specific matchups discussed, right? Obviously, Jubidara smashes any version of Obito, clearly. Completely obliterates any version of Obito, including DMS Obito, right? So, well, specifically the sick one that we saw, because he wasn't near full power, right? So simply put, that's my thoughts on the video. I'm actually quite surprised by how it went, and quite surprised by how my mind has changed on the matter. But again, Swag and Six are some of the best in the community, and that was shown today. But let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Are some of you guys outraged that me, Swag, and Six now side with Obito beating Madara? Please let me know if you are outraged, or do you coincide with what we say and believe Obito does beat Madara, or at least stalemates him because of Kamui? Let me know of that as well in the comment section below. But that's going to wrap it up, folks, and I'll catch you in the next video. This is Jay the Gray signing out. Peace.